still remember the exact moment my world tilted. Not shattered, not exploded, just tilted enough that nothing ever sat right again. I was standing just outside the ballroom doors of one of the most expensive hotels in downtown Atlanta. Crystal chandeliers glowed behind the glass. Soft piano music floated through the air. Men in tailored suits and women in elegant dresses laughed like life had never disappointed them. And there I was, a 63-year-old farmer with hands shaped by soil instead of silk. I had driven nearly 3 hours straight from my land, dust still clinging to the cuffs of my pants, my boots cleaned as best as they could be after decades of honest work. I had showered, shaved, combed my thinning gray hair twice just to be sure. I wore the only suit I owned, the same one I'd worn to church funerals and my daughter's wedding. This night mattered. It was my son's engagement dinner. I took a breath, straightened my shoulders, and pushed the doors open. That's when I heard it. Not shouted, not announced. Whispered, but whispered with the kind of cruelty that doesn't need volume. The dirty hick finally showed up. The words slid into my chest like a dull blade. I froze. I didn't turn around. I didn't react. I didn't even breathe for a second. I just stood there as the sentence echoed louder than the music, louder than the laughter, louder than my own heartbeat. I knew that voice. Cassandra Sterling. My future daughter-in-law. I felt my face heat up. My ears burned. Blood rushed so fast to my head I thought I might faint. My first instinct, the old instinct, was to leave. Turn around, walk back to my truck, drive home, and pretend this place never existed. I had done that before in my life. Swallowed insults, took humiliation quietly, let people like her believe they were better than me because their hands were soft and their words were sharp. I took one step back. That's when my son grabbed my arm. "Pop," he whispered, pulling me close like he used to when he was a boy afraid of thunder. "Easy." I looked at him. His eyes weren't angry. They weren't embarrassed. They were focused. "Tomorrow," he said calmly, "we get our revenge." That sentence stopped me colder than the insult ever could. Revenge wasn't a word my son used lightly. I raised him better than that. Or so I thought. I wanted to ask questions, demand explanations, but something in his grip, firm, steady, told me to trust him. So I nodded, and I stayed. Before I tell you what happened next, you need to understand who I am, because that whisper didn't hurt just because it was cruel. It hurt because it was wrong. My name is Elijah Davis. Most folks call me Eli. I'm 63 years old, born and raised on a small stretch of land just outside Monroe County, Georgia. My father worked that land, his father before him. 3 generations of sunburned necks, early mornings, and dirt under the fingernails. I wasn't raised with silver spoons. I was raised with calluses. From the time I could walk, I learned what honest work felt like. Corn in the summer, sweet potatoes in the fall, greens, beans, irrigation repairs, fences that needed fixing every time a storm rolled through. My father used to say, "A man's worth ain't measured by what he owns, but by what he refuses to sell." That stuck with me. We didn't have much money, but we had enough. A roof that didn't leak, food on the table, clothes that were clean, even if they weren't new, and something far more valuable, self-respect. I married my wife, Sarah, when I was 25. Church wedding, simple vows, more love than decoration. She was kind in the way that doesn't announce itself, the kind of woman who could calm a storm just by touching your arm. We had 2 children, Malcolm, my son, Nia, my daughter. We raised them the same way we were raised. Work hard, tell the truth, respect everyone, and never look down on someone just because they come from a different place than you. Sarah passed away 6 years ago. Heart condition, too fast, too quiet, too final. You don't ever really recover from that kind of loss. You just learn how to breathe around it. Nia married a good man, a teacher. They have a little girl who calls me Grandpa and thinks my farm is the greatest place on earth. Nia never forgot where she came from. Malcolm was different. Not better. Just different. Smart, curious. Always asking how things worked, not just how to do them. He earned a scholarship to Tuskegee University, studied agricultural engineering, and made me prouder than I ever knew a man could be. He didn't abandon the land. He wanted to improve it. Even when he moved to the city for work, he came home every weekend. We'd sit on the porch at sunset, beers in hand, talking about crops, weather, and life. So when he told me he had met someone, I listened. Her name was Cassandra Sterling. Cassie. From Connecticut. Greenwich, to be exact. The way Malcolm said it, careful, almost rehearsed, told me everything I needed to know. That name carried weight. Money. Status. When he brought her home for dinner, she was polite. Well-dressed. Perfect smile. But her eyes looked at me the way people look at antiques in a museum. Curious, judging, detached. She never insulted me outright. That would have been too obvious. Instead, she asked questions that felt like measurements. How long have you lived here, Mr. Davis? All your life? Oh, wow, that's impressive. Impressive wasn't meant kindly. When Malcolm told me they were engaged, I hugged him and meant it when I said I was happy if he was happy. But something in my gut tightened. You learn to trust that feeling when you've lived long enough. Her parents were introduced soon after. Wallace and Deborah Sterling. They lived in a gated estate so quiet it felt sterile, every surface polished, every smile calculated. Wallace shook my hand like he was closing a deal. Deborah smiled with her lips, not her eyes. They asked questions too. Questions about the farm, the land, ownership. Not about family history, not about memories, assets. I stayed polite. I stayed quiet. I stayed out of my son's way, because love makes people blind, and fathers don't get to choose who their sons love. Which brings us back to the engagement dinner. The insult, the whisper. The moment everything changed. Malcolm guided me to a table with his colleagues, engineers, consultants, people who spoke to me like I mattered. They asked about irrigation systems, soil rotation, sustainable yield. They respected me. Across the room, Cassie laughed, toasted champagne, never once looked in my direction. Her father glanced at me once and smirked. After the dinner, Malcolm asked me to come with him to his car. That's when he showed me the recordings. That's when I learned the truth. But the parking garage smelled like oil and concrete. Malcolm didn't turn the engine on right away. He just sat there, hands on the steering wheel, jaw tight. I could hear my own breathing louder than the hum of cars passing above us. "Pop," he said finally. "I need you to listen to everything before you say anything." I nodded. My throat felt dry. He unlocked his phone and opened a folder. There were dozens of audio files, dates, times, locations. "What is all this?" I asked. "Evidence." That word didn't belong in my son's voice. It sounded too sharp, too deliberate. 3 weeks ago, he continued, Cassie started asking questions that didn't sit right with me. Not about us, about you. My chest tightened. She wanted to know if the farm was in your name, if there was a will, how much the land might be worth in the next few years. I frowned. That don't sound like wedding talk. It wasn't, he said quietly. At first, I thought she was just being practical, planning for the future. But then she pushed harder. She said after we married, we should convince you to transfer the land to me, for protection, she said, in case of taxes or health issues. My hands curled into fists. And when I said no, Malcolm continued. She got frustrated, said you were stubborn, outdated, that you didn't understand how the modern world works. There it was, the same tone, the same contempt. He tapped one of the files. Then I overheard something I wasn't supposed to hear. The first recording played. Cassie's voice filled the car. Clear, confident, cruel in a way that no imagination could soften. Only 2 more weeks, she said. Once we're married, Malcolm will do whatever I ask. He always does. Another voice, her mother. And his father? Oh, please. That old man's a fool. He'll sign anything his son puts in front of him. My stomach dropped. Malcolm stopped the audio. There's more, he said. He played another. Her father's voice this time. That land is in the path of the highway expansion. Developers are already circling. In 2 years, it'll be worth 10 times what it is now. Cassie laughed. That's why I'm marrying him. I felt something break inside me. Not anger yet. Shock. The kind that makes your body go numb while your mind races to catch up. Malcolm stared straight ahead. They weren't guessing, Pop. They had maps, contracts, buyers lined up. My farm, my father's land, reduced to numbers on a spreadsheet. They never loved you, Malcolm said, his voice cracking just enough to let the truth slip through. They never respected you. They were waiting for you to die or disappear. Silence swallowed the car. I thought about every sunrise I'd watched over that land, every fence post, every storm repaired, every memory built with hands they called dirty. And suddenly, the insult at the ballroom made sense. It wasn't cruelty, it was confidence. They already thought they had won. I recorded everything after that, Malcolm continued. Every conversation they thought was private. I didn't want to believe it at first. I hoped I was wrong. He looked at me then. I wasn't. I leaned back, staring at the ceiling of the garage. What are you going to do? I asked. He didn't hesitate. Tomorrow, at the wedding, I'm going to show everyone who they really are. My heart jumped. In front of everyone? Yes. That'll ruin everything. That's the point. I studied my son's face. The boy who used to bring me drawings of tractors. The man now sitting beside me with evidence of a crime in his pocket. You sure about this? I asked. He nodded. I'd rather lose a wedding than lose my soul. I reached for him and pulled him into a hug. Hard. The way fathers hug sons when words fail. I'm proud of you, I said. He exhaled, like he'd been holding his breath for weeks. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay in my hotel room listening to traffic and thinking about Sarah. What she would have said. How she would have looked at our son with that quiet pride she carried so well. By morning, my decision was made. I would stand beside him, no matter what happened. The next day, Malcolm introduced me to the man handling the technical side of things. A quiet fellow with a laptop and steady hands. He explained how the audio and video would be displayed during the ceremony. It'll be clear, he said. No confusion, no editing tricks, just truth. Truth. Such a fragile thing, and yet so heavy when it finally drops. The wedding venue was stunning. White flowers, soft lighting, rows of seats filled with people who believed they were about to witness love. I sat alone in the front row. The seat beside me, where Sarah should have been, felt heavier than all the rest. The music started. Cassie walked in, radiant, confident, smiling like someone who already owned the future. Malcolm stood tall at the altar. The officiant spoke about commitment, trust, honesty. I almost laughed at the irony. Then came the vows. Do you take? Wait, Malcolm said. The room stilled. There's something everyone here needs to see before this goes any further. He nodded once. The screen lit up. The first recording played. Gasps rippled through the crowd like wind through tall grass. Faces turned. Whispers erupted. Cassie froze. That's fake, she screamed. But the voices didn't stop. Her voice didn't stop. Her laughter didn't stop. Her words, every ugly one, hung in the air like smoke. When the recording ended, the room was silent. Not peaceful. Stunned. Malcolm looked at her. "You were never going to be my wife," he said calmly. "You were just waiting to steal from my family." Her father stood up, shouting. Her mother cried. Guests stood, phones raised, capturing the moment greed finally met daylight. And me? I sat still, just like my son asked, because this wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about truth. The police arrived. Lawyers were mentioned. Names were called. The wedding dissolved into chaos. But one thing was clear. The farm was safe. My son was free. And the people who thought they could take everything without consequence were finally exposed. That night, when the ballroom emptied, Malcolm and I sat together in silence. "It's over," he said. "No," I replied softly. "It's just beginning." The morning after the wedding that never was, Atlanta looked the same. Traffic moved. Coffee shops opened. People complained about work and weather like nothing extraordinary had happened the night before. But for us, everything was different. Malcolm didn't go back to his apartment. He came home with me to the farm, said he needed quiet, said he needed ground under his feet that hadn't lied to him. I understood that. The first few days passed in a blur of phone calls, lawyers, messages, people we hadn't spoken to in years suddenly wanting to check in. Some were genuinely concerned, others were just hungry for details. The story spread fast. A groom exposing his bride at the altar. People love drama, but they love justice even more when it feels cinematic. What most of them didn't see was the aftermath. The way Malcolm stared at nothing while sitting on the porch. The way he flinched every time his phone buzzed. The way betrayal lingers longer than anger ever does. 3 days later, we got the call. A prosecutor from Fulton County wanted to meet. The building was cold in that way government offices always are. Beige walls, fluorescent lights, chairs that looked designed to make you uncomfortable on purpose. The man who greeted us didn't smile. That wasn't a bad sign. He introduced himself, shook our hands, and got straight to business. "I've reviewed the recordings," he said, "and the preliminary documents you provided." He leaned back in his chair. "This is not a domestic dispute," he continued. "This is an organized fraud attempt." That sentence carried weight. He explained what we were facing. Conspiracy charges, document forgery, financial crimes. He said words I'd only heard on television before. Indictment, investigation, asset-sizer. Malcolm listened quietly. I watched his hands, still, clenched, controlled. "Here's what you need to understand," the prosecutor said. "Families like this don't usually have just one victim." He was right. Within a week, others came forward. A woman from Florida who'd almost married into the family. A man whose business collapsed after partnering with Wallace Sterling. An older couple threatened into silence after refusing to hand over property documents. Each story different. Each pattern the same. Charm. Pressure. Manipulation. Extraction. Malcolm wasn't their first attempt. He was just the one who caught them on record. The Sterling family fought back. Hard. They hired lawyers from New York. Filed counterclaims. Accused Malcolm of defamation and illegal recording. Tried to paint him as a bitter man embarrassed by rejection. It was ugly. I was called many things in those filings. Controlling. Backward. Obsessive. They said I manipulated my son. That I was afraid of losing my land. That I had orchestrated everything. I read those documents sitting at my kitchen table. Hands shaking. Not with fear, but disbelief. These people didn't just want to escape consequences, they wanted to rewrite reality. The trial date was set 3 months out. 3 months of waiting. 3 months of reliving everything. Malcolm stayed on the farm that entire time. We worked together, fixed fences, repaired irrigation, mended things that had been neglected. There's something healing about manual labor when your mind is torn apart. One afternoon, while we sat under the old oak tree near the field's edge, Malcolm broke the silence. "Pop," he said, staring out at the rows of crops, "do you think I'm weak?" I turned to him. Weak for trusting her, for not seeing it sooner. I thought for a moment. Trusting someone doesn't make you weak, I said. Ignoring the truth does. And you didn't. He nodded slowly. The worst part, he admitted, is that part of me still misses who I thought she was. That's grief, I said. Not love. The courtroom was packed on the first day of trial. Reporters, observers, people who had no stake in our lives, but wanted a front-row seat to consequences. The Sterling family arrived together. Expensive suits, controlled expressions. Cassie looked smaller somehow, not humbled, just exposed. The prosecutor laid everything out methodically. Recordings, contracts, bank transfers, each piece stacking higher than the last. When I took the stand, I didn't speak loudly. I didn't need to. I told them about the land, about my father, about my son, about the whisper that changed everything. I told them how it felt to realize someone planned to erase generations of work with a signature I never gave. The defense tried to shake me, suggested I was emotional, biased, motivated by pride. I stayed calm, because truth doesn't need anger to survive. Malcolm's testimony was harder to watch. They questioned his motives, his intelligence, his masculinity. He answered every question steadily. I recorded them because I believed a crime was being planned, he said. And I was right. Expert witnesses followed. Audio analysts confirmed the recordings were unaltered. Document specialists confirmed forged signatures. Financial experts traced money trails that led straight to Wallace Sterling. The walls closed in. Then something unexpected happened. Another witness came forward mid-trial. A woman named Candace. She stood up in that courtroom and told a story nearly identical to ours, different names, same ending. She had proof, too. A recording of Wallace Sterling threatening her after she refused to cooperate. That broke something in the room. Patterns don't lie. The trial lasted 2 weeks. When the judge read the verdict, the room held its breath. Guilty. On all major counts, sentences were handed down. Years, not months. Prison, not fines. Cassie didn't cry. Her parents did. As they were led away, I felt no joy, only relief. Justice isn't loud. It's quiet, like finally being able to sleep. Outside the courthouse, Malcolm hugged me. It's over, he said. Yes, I replied. Now it is. The farm felt different after the trial. Not cleaner, not brighter, quieter. The kind of quiet that settles after a storm has passed and left everything standing that truly mattered. Malcolm stayed. Not out of obligation. Not because he had nowhere else to go. Because he wanted to. In the mornings, we worked side by side like we used to when he was younger. He learned again how the land breathed when it needed water, when it needed rest, when it needed patience instead of force. Some days we barely spoke. Other days we talked for hours. There was no pressure to fill the silence anymore. Silence, when earned, can be a gift. The calls didn't stop right away. Producers, journalists, podcasts. People wanting Malcolm to tell his story. He turned most of them down. I don't want to be famous for being betrayed, he said. I want to be known for what I build next. I understood that. Fame is loud, legacy is quiet. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the fields gold, Malcolm handed me a folder. What's this? I asked. He smiled. Something I should have done a long time ago. Inside were documents not for transferring the land away from me, but for protecting it. A trust. clear succession planning, safeguards that made exploitation nearly impossible. You didn't have to, I said. I know, he replied. That's why I wanted to. My throat tightened. This wasn't about property anymore. It was about respect. A month later, we hosted a small gathering on the farm. Nothing fancy. Neighbors, old friends, people who'd known Sarah, people who'd known my father. They didn't come for a spectacle. They came to remind us who we were before the world got loud. Someone played music on a cracked speaker. Kids ran through the fields. Laughter drifted into the night like it used to. At one point, Malcolm stood and tapped his glass. I don't have a speech, he said. Just a thank you for standing by us when it mattered. He looked at me then, and for teaching me that integrity is worth more than comfort. I didn't say anything. Didn't need to. Time passed. Slowly. Honestly. Malcolm started consulting again, but this time selectively. Helping small businesses, family-owned operations, people who reminded him of us. He turned down money that came with strings. He slept better. So did I. One afternoon, while sorting through old boxes in the attic, we found Sarah's journals. We sat on the floor reading her handwriting. She'd written about Malcolm, about her hopes, about the farm. One line stopped us both. If he grows up kind, everything else will work itself out. Malcolm wiped his eyes. She was right, he said. Yes, I replied. She usually was. Years later, people would still ask about the wedding, about the recordings, about the trial. Malcolm learned to smile politely and redirect the conversation. Let me tell you about the farm, he'd say instead. And that told me everything. On my birthday, Malcolm gave me a small wooden box. Inside was a key. What's it for? I asked. The future, he said. He'd purchased the neighboring parcel of land, not for profit, but preservation. So no one ever corners us again, he explained. I laughed softly. Looks like you learned something after all. He smiled. I learned from you. Now, when I walk the fields at dawn, I feel something I hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. Not because nothing bad can happen, but because we faced what did and didn't let it define us. The land remains. The family remains. And the truth? The truth always finds its way into the light.